Right, thank you. Kia ora koutou, good morning everybody. Welcome along to the Audit and Risk Committee meeting. And we have open with some special welcomes to a couple of people who are here for the first time, or actually only one because the auditors haven't appeared yet. To Grant McKenna, the General Manager, Finance and Assurance. Welcome, Grant, to your first meeting. And Dave Mills, who was in the role on a temporary basis, is now in the role of FMIS Lead and Principal Advisor to Grant. So just so councillors are aware. Financial Management Information Systems. So welcome, Grant. Okay, we do have one apologies. Councillor Sunkel, who was here at the briefing meeting, has actually left us for the actual meeting itself, so he has noted an apology. Are there any conflicts of interest in relation to matters on today's agenda? No. There have been no requests for public forums, deputations or petitions. Is there any extraordinary or urgent business anyone wishes to raise? Thank you. We have no notices of motion. So we'll move straight into confirmation of the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting from the 15th of May. Those minutes have been circulated. Do I have any corrections? If not, can I please have a mover and a seconder? Moved, Councillor Ward. Seconded, Councillor Edge. All those in favour? Anyone against? Thank you. Carried. Okay, let's get straight into items for information. And first up, I'd like to welcome David Walker to talk us through the Bancorp Treasury Services report and our quarterly report. Welcome, David.
So I have you all fresh and raring to go then. Just wondering if it's just worth mixing it up today. Do you want to just get into questions, then we can talk about the report, or should we just do the usual?
Just do the usual, if that's fine with me. Thank you.
Oh, great, thank you. Okay, I sent a note out to clients on Monday, and the wording was something along the lines of just when you thought things couldn't get any stranger. And obviously, I'm talking about sort of US events really. And obviously, that's still the key focus from the global economy perspective, and obviously its flow through in terms of New Zealand. But anyway, that's just sort of the brief introduction. Let's have a look at the report. I assume it's sort of taken as read, so I'll just sort of quickly run through it. First three words are the first 5 words is the New Zealand story is weak. Interesting, it's probably weaker now than what it was 3 months ago, or even what it was 6 months ago. And there's some indicators that I'll show you a little bit later on. The exceptions of those are for agri and tourism. And there's a very different story, North Island versus South Island, and provincial versus urban as well. Challenge, though, for the Reserve Bank, and we kind of got that at the last Reserve Bank statement, was that inflation is still uncomfortably high at the top end of their inflation bands. While people talk about the Reserve Bank having inflation bands between 1% and 3%, that effectively means they target 2%. So while we've got inflation sort of at the high 2s, it's still sort of problematic. Next bit we'll talk about is the global story, and then the reporting, and then what's on our mind. So the Reserve Bank has basically put out one of the criticisms about the Reserve Bank. A lot of the data that they've been putting out has been historical. For example, quarterly GDP number some of the data could be 3 months old, could be even longer. So they're developing a new sort of what they call as GDP Now forecast. They look at some leading indicators there just to get a guide to where they think the economy is going, and they're hoping that'll tell us a more accurate story. But the key thing to focus on there is that blue line. Again, 3 months ago, economic growth was above zero. Well, the indicators were above zero. Now it's sort of trading in sort of negative. So that's sort of, recession sort of status for the economy as a whole. Offset, though, tourism, that recovery is still occurring. Obviously, there's some exceptions to that, particularly with the Chinese tourists, but in general, that story looks better. And we actually, one of the lines from one of my colleagues, when we talk about Central Otago, it's almost like that. It's like Andorra. It's like a country within a country. So there's certain parts of New Zealand that are still going exceptionally well. The biggest, what does all this mean in terms of the Reserve Bank? If you believe market pricing, there's around about a 90% chance that the Reserve Bank will cut interest rates on the 20th of August. So that would take the cash rate to 3%, and that would represent 250 basis points of cuts from its peak of 5.5, which was June, July last year. So it's incredible how quickly things have changed. And just to put that 250 basis points in perspective, in terms of previous rate cutting cycles and what we refer to as the modern era of monetary policy, and that's right up there in terms of extent of the size of the rate cut cycle. This slide here is just sort of indicating that as inflation is still a story, but what we're trying to do is sort of paint a story about which part of where that is inflation is sort of emanating from. And you're probably well aware of things like food, energy and local authority rates as being one of the main catalysts for inflation remaining high in that June quarter. Right. So I wrote this a few weeks ago, and it feels like a long time ago already. US Federal Reserve's independence has been challenged. You probably saw on the weekend was talking about that President Trump wasn't at all happy with the way that employment data was released and sacked the person responsible for that. One of the members from the Fed resigned, arguably under pressure, so that she could be replaced with someone that was more sympathetic to Trump's view of his monetary policies. I think I mentioned last time too that we've had the big beautiful tax bill came through. That's depending on what numbers you look at, and again, just reiterating that we now no longer talk about billions of dollars; we talk about trillions of dollars. So that will add somewhere between $2 to $3 trillion of debt to the US already problematic debt situation. So we can talk about that becoming unsustainable, and I think that will be a topic over coming years. That third point was prophetic, wasn't it? 15% new minimum. That's what New Zealand ended up with last week. The problem there for New Zealand is that arguably we're in a competitive disadvantage with our trading partners. Australia's at 10, Argentina's at 10 as well. So from an agricultural point of view, it just puts us at a disadvantage. It's not good. Tariffs are not good, but when tariffs are significantly favour one country versus another, it's not ideal. 10 versus 15. It's not something that's going to kill anybody. But sorry, that's a bad choice of word. But it's not something that is going to significantly hurt sectors. But it's going to just make it harder for some sectors, and obviously that will affect profitability and investment into those sort of areas. I think we've talked about those before. The global trade changes, they've kind of ripped up the rules in terms of global trade. And that last point there is, could there be unintended positive consequences for New Zealand? Yeah, there could be. Like, for example, if countries can't... there might be situations where, for example, a product that perhaps would have gone to the US could come to New Zealand cheaper than perhaps it would have otherwise. And there may be some markets where previously they would have sent their... I suppose what I'm trying to say here, there could be well benefits for some parts of our export sector as well. Right, here's your dashboard. As you would expect, everything is well managed. All the covenants, all the things you'd be concerned about are looking very good. Well managed. Your cost of funds has fallen to 365. That's the bottom quartile of basically of all the councils that we deal with. So you're doing very well there. Any questions on that just before I move on? debt was slightly lower this quarter as opposed to last quarter, but that's really just for kind of seasonal factors rather than as a longer term basis. If not, I'll carry on. That graph, top left-hand corner, I'll get to that shortly. That basically shows what we need to do from a fixed cover point of view. In the next couple of months, just due to time erosion, those will be outside of our Treasury policy parameters, so we'll need to deal with that, and there is a plan for that. Okay, so what's on our mind for the coming quarters? As I said, time erosion will see ECAN outside of its 4 to 8 year time ban in Q4 2025, and we'll remedy that because there is one of the loans that's maturing in September. We'll just refix that for a period of 5 years. It's good for a policy reason, and interest rates are very good in terms of for doing that as well. So that's already been kind of hinted at, but a formal recommendation will come through in the next week or two. As I said earlier, the cutting cycle, once is already 225 basis points, will be more likely to be 250 basis points this time in a week. On the 20th, I mean. I'm getting ahead of myself. And from a Treasury advisor's point of view, we're now, and I've kind of hinted at this in the last 5 or 6 meetings too, that we think we're getting towards the sort of bottom end of that cycle. So rather than just saying at Treasury policy minimums, we'll be looking to use any further falls in rates from these levels as an opportunity to move from Treasury policy minimums to more year Treasury policy midpoints. We won't be in a hurry to do that unless we see economic data suggest the otherwise. I'll leave that to you guys to read, just economics for stuff in New Zealand and the United States. I'm sure you've read just background stuff, and I'll just quickly shoot through to the last slide, which is any questions, and pass the ball back to you guys.
Thank you, David. Continues to be interesting times economically, and I guess I'll open up to any questions before I ask one. But any questions? Yes, Councillor Scott.
Yeah, Mike, if you don't mind, if I ask a question, then I need to leave. It's not your company. It's just I've got another appointment in Rangiora. So GDP is a bit bouncy and upheld by the agri-cess. And I haven't got a view on this either, but on fast track, what the fast track consenting process, once some of those things get through, what effect that may have?
Yes, I do. And this is one of the problems I think New Zealand has. And if you look, for example, and I mentioned this to Councillor Swiggs, but look at waters, for example. You're going to be in a situation where all the water entities are going to hit the go button at the same time, right? So you're going to be in a situation where the government's going to be hitting the go button in terms of infrastructure, in terms of roading, other sorts of stuff. The waters entities are going to hit the go button as well. So you're talking billions of dollars, and it takes, I'm not sure if you saw the stuff from the Infrastructure Commission, which really sort of left a message for me. Like New Zealand, I think I got the numbers right, is in the top 10 in terms of infrastructure spend, but in the bottom 10 in terms of outcomes. And again, we just do a really poor job in New Zealand and just sort of smoothing out the infrastructure spend. So generally when it's done, it's going to be inefficient. So I don't think I quite answered your question, but in a sense, that will help in terms of improvements in GDP, but it just won't be optimal spending, really.
Good question. Thank you. Councillor Southworth.
Yeah, well, I've got a question just on the inflation graph, which was just to clarify that although it looks like insurance is sort of like went up really high and then it's dropping back down, it's actually not. I'm right in thinking it's not, is it? This is the rate of change, and so everything's still sitting above zero. So everything's still inflating. It's just not inflating as fast.
Yes and no, but the no bit hopefully you'll find of interest. What I find actually with some of my clients, they're actually, when they come to renegotiate their insurance, they're actually getting quite big price reductions from where it was a year ago. So there's more players in the market and there's more capacity as well. So if you wind the clock back 2 years ago, it was really hard to get insurance, and now that seems to have turned around the other way. So that's the yes and the no of that, really. But yeah, overall, the insurance is an improving story. So yeah.
And if I just with a few of us went yesterday to see Shamabil Yacob talk, and he talked about the infrastructure plan and showed how there's like some really short-term spending and then there's like nothing on the plan subsequently. And he commented that like when he done the graphing of it, just in terms of the pipeline, the infrastructure pipeline, it's sort of, there's not a consistent spend that's projected in there. And his comment that he made, and I'm interested to know if you would support this view, was that infrastructure is actually really good to do whilst there is a recession when there's competition. And he said currently what's happened is that all that spending's been sort of chopped off at the knees. And I think to your point that when it gets switched back on and everything picks back up, suddenly there's no competition in the market because everyone's trying to get the same type of work done, and suddenly it costs a lot more.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think the trick of life really is almost want to be sort of slightly anti-cyclical, do stuff when at times when others aren't doing it. And again, I think the story is probably still, people are still if you that probably won't be the case in a year's time. And anecdotal sort of stuff we saw from our client base. We saw some of our largest sort of construction entities, they were looking at smaller jobs, which they normally would not look at. So I was pushing the clients that I had some input in terms of when to do the CapEx spending was to do it as quick as you can, because it's probably never going to get cheaper. It's always hard, of course, when everyone's feeling the pain. But again, I think that for want of a better, the trick in life is trying to look through those sorts of things, really. Yeah.
Thank you. I think I had Councillor Swiggs, then Councillor Karakia, and then I'll come to Councillor Edge.
Yeah, mine's only relatively a quick one, but I see at some stage the government's going to have to turn on the money printing, potentially. They are very much printing a lot of money in the United States at the moment. Do we have any information about the M2 money supply and how that may influence potentially our decisions in the long-term future? And is there any predictions around, or people looking at predictions or anything in that space? It seems to be a missing bit.
Money printing? No, I wouldn't say that they're money printing. They're actually not at the moment. They're not. No, but I think again, if we can learn lessons of what happened over COVID. There's a really good argument for saying the reason that inflation got so out of control post that COVID period was as a consequence of that money printing. And so you've still got a situation at the moment where previously central banks that were buying bonds, which is a form of money printing, they're actually reducing their portfolios, those bonds. So it is a tool that they could use. Very little evidence that it works over the longer term. Anything is possible. Oh, look, the playbook over. Yeah, could well be. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Karakia.
Morena. With all the global financial uncertainty, in the sort of investment advice, retirement planning services, is that actually driving people more to get professional advice in that kind of sector? Because, and when I say that, more credible, so, going more to companies that actually specialise in financial advice, and particularly independent financial advice, is that having an effect on where those people go now? Is that the market that's really growing at the moment?
Wasn't expecting that question today. So are more people looking for professional advice in relation to their retirement savings? Is that a question? Or is that essentially what you're asking? Yeah. Look, it's not an area that I closely follow. You would like to think so. Interesting, though, when you look at the growth of Sharesies and Hatch, that sort of stuff, that there's probably evidence to say that there is a lot of people that are managing their own kind of investments. What I would say though, and look, this is just anecdotal stuff, talking to my friends that are share brokers and the like, so this is far from, this is as anecdotal rather than evidence, is that most KiwiSaver funds, there's actually very little difference between all those sort of funds, really. They have their own sort of strict asset allocation type decisions, between growth, high growth, and conservative, blah, blah, blah. And most of those sort of index sort of followers. So I'm not really answering your question, but in terms of the bulk of professional advice, it does offer a reasonably regimented type of solutions based on what they perceive as their clients' risk profiles. Probably didn't do a very good job answering that, but
No, that's okay, because when you look at on this slide here, and one of the biggest contributors to inflation is local rates. We're looking at 11.9%. Yeah, am I reading that right? So when you look at the ages of sort of our own ratepayers, I mean, a lot of them are actually moving towards that whole retirement thing. There was an interesting article talking about, when they do look at sort of financial management, individual personal financial management, they kind of do look at these kinds of things now, and we've got to be cognizant in the fact that we're the ones who set the rates, and why is. So it's about what they want to know. Why do we need to do that now when they've never done it before?
I don't get an exact answer to that question, but something I find relevant to that question about rates and what ratepayers are expecting. Look, there's a real disconnect there, because your ratepayers, they're more concerned with inflation which is measured by consumer price inflation, right? Whereas most councils, their inflation is not consumer price related. In many cases, it's sort of infrastructure priced. So there's no real exact. What I'm trying to say is councils in general have different inflationary pressures on them as opposed to what their ratepayers have, which is the disconnect between consumer price inflation and, as say, probably the inflationary pressures that councils such as the like you guys face as well. So it's very difficult to try and achieve something that will perhaps keep your ratepayers happy. And I suppose it's just a case of the ratepayers understanding, what they're paying, what they're paying and for what reasons and what services they get for that, I suppose.
Thank you. I'm just conscious of time, but and it's good. It's a very good comment there, David, about the different pressure that New Zealand has, the sort of preoccupation with the CPI being the benchmark for everyone around what should be the adjustment for budgeting and forecasting. It's a very blunt tool. Yeah. Councillor Edge,
just quickly, just the observations there. The OCR down to 3%, but it could fall even more in the November round, with the job market being under stress, unemployment, but also in terms of the infrastructure stuff and the ability to do that work. If the government does press the buttons, a lot of people are going overseas, and so skilled labour would need to then come back again. Do you think that that's potentially something that could happen in terms of the situation? It's still not as buoyant as it should be.
Is that the point we spoke about before? When we push the go button for infrastructure spend, there's not going to be people here to do it. Is that kind of what you look? I agree with that point, but I think part of the reason you pay me and Bancorp for this advice is just to kind of remind you in terms of what should our goalposts be. And I have we as a firm, we have a view that when we get to rates in New Zealand, OCR rates sort of 3.25 and 3%, they should be considered very good rates, and anything below that should be considered a bonus rather than as a permanent sort of fixture in terms of the of rates in New Zealand as such. So I kind of remind people that over the last 10 years, we have had rates that have been exceptionally low, but that's been for things like GFCs and COVID and stuff. If you strip out those sort of numbers, which I like to think are exceptions, when we're getting those sort of rates I just mentioned before, we should be very happy to take those on. It may not necessarily be the absolute lows, and rates do have the potential to undershoot as much as overshoot, but I think you know what I'm saying. Yeah.
Your comment about Otago or Central Otago being a bit of an anomaly in the New Zealand economy, I kind of think the relationship between what's happening there, why are people going there, tourism, recreation, the environment, and we have a situation where the environmental focus has kind of been lost a little bit in the current with the current situation, the current government. Do you think they're not quite looking at? Oh no, you don't need to answer that. Do you think that it's really important that we look after our environment because that is attracting international tourism? We have the levy business that's risen in a few spots. Is that really important that we don't lose focus on that aspect of the economy in favour of infrastructure? That it is the environment, which is like free, almost not having to do much because nature's doing it for us.
Yes, it's important. Very important. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to round out with one final question. And it's really just a confirmation, David. Given the uncertainty, given what we're dealing with, you guys have been dealing with advisory-wise for the last sort of probably 12 to 18 months, really, but certainly since Mr. Trump took over. I guess a confirmation around just where this council's sitting from the ability to have a relatively conservative but still appropriate profile with the level of uncertainty that we're seeing, which is very hard and more unpredictable probably than it's been for quite some time. And I know it's in the reports to a certain extent, but really just confirmation from your point of view, we are as well placed as we can be to kind of conservatively carry on through this period of uncertainty.
Yes, and I think just remind you that I think the conversation we had last meeting about your credit rating. There's no council out there with a better credit rating, so that tells a really big part of that story.
Yeah. And enables us to continue to be in that I was going to say positive position, but in the best position we could probably be given the current circumstances.
Well, yeah, and possibly something we're alluding to. There are some councils out there who have very limited choices in terms of what they will be able to do over coming years, as opposed to yourself. Certainly from a balance sheet and from a credit rating point of view, you have the luxury of choices.
Yeah.
You can make many choices.
Very good. Thank you. If that's all for now, thank you, David. I'll then put the motion that we receive the quarterly report from Bancorp Treasury Services to 30 June 2025, which confirms that Environment Canterbury remains compliant and within its Treasury policy and borrowing covenants. Do I have a mover, please? Thank you, Councillor Swiggs. Seconded, Councillor Ward. Those in favour? Aye. Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. We'll move on to item 8 in the agenda, which it does include items for decision. So this is the accounting information to support the annual report. And I would ask Dave and Grant, please, to come to the table to talk to the relevant papers. Welcome, Dave, and again, welcome you, Grant, for the first time to the table in a Audit and Risk Committee meeting.
Kia ora, councillors and members. I guess just by way of introduction, the intention of this paper is to try and get you ahead of the curve into some of the, I guess, bigger areas of judgment that will come up in the committee, I guess, recommending to the new council the adoption of the financial statements within the annual report. It contains a number of matters, and obviously there's some significant supporting information with the valuation matters. I'll just highlight that there are actually 4, I guess, asset valuations that will require, I guess, your comfort. One is the land reserves and buildings. That's the one that's outstanding at the moment. That's not far away, and I'll talk to the indicative value uplift at the end of my comments. The second is the flood protection and control works. The third is forestry assets net of the carbon credit impact, and the fourth is the remaining carbon credit unit valuation. So the last of those two are kind of covered in the forestry report. The valuation reports are provided to you to help you form a view on the proposed revisions to the asset values. And I guess my encouragement to you in you thinking about this, questions and discussion, would be to stay focused on three areas in particular. One, the valuation methodology. Two, any issues that you might have that could impact materially that valuation. And probably the third one is the materiality itself. I guess there's a table in the paper which kind of highlights, gives you a very clear view on kind of what valuations really matter, I guess, in terms of the balance sheet. So I just encourage you to think about that as well. I accept that there's a lot of material, and I kind of would usually say I take the paper as read. There's just a lot in there, but I do take it as read. And the only additional information I can provide on top of the papers is that fourth valuation. That's the one that's outstanding. And the indicative guidance from the valuer who's completing the report at the moment is that we'll see an uplift of around about 80 million, 80, which is a 15% increase. Now that we need to work through that, because based on their last year's work, and you'll see a note in the paper, that's probably a bigger uplift than we were expecting. So I might leave it at that and take any questions.
Thank you, Dave. And just for the comfort of the committee, also just to confirm, the valuers that we've used are consistent with those we've used in the past. The methodology they've applied this time is consistent with the methodology that's been used before. And from an audit point of view, sorry, Chantal, audit are comfortable with the approach that the valuers, I know you're still working through the actual valuations in detail, but at a high level, the approach the valuers have taken, you're comfortable as an appropriate approach for financial reporting. Okay, thank you. I'll just repeat that. So Chantal's just, for those particularly online, just highlighted that audit are still actually working through the process of reviewing the valuations at this point and confirming methodology, etc. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'll open it to the floor for questions. Yes, again, taken as read, albeit there's a lot of content and particularly the detailed stuff of the actual reports that are there. Councillor Southworth.
Thank you. In looking at the table in paragraph 20, which is on the forestry valuation and the stock banks, it's interesting actually following on from the last presentation where the percentage increase between 2022 and 25, you got some really sizable increases for the stock bank work, and then decreases for tree planting. But my question's around the tree planting unit. Could you just explain how that's actually measured? We've got a unit price that's per metre, but I don't quite understand, it's not like per tree or per hectare planted at such and such a gap of tree spacing or whatever. So I'm not quite understanding the units.
I confess I'm not a valuer, so I can't directly answer your question, but we can find that out from the valuer, there's no doubt about that. I'd try and bring you back to this valuation is done on a depreciated replacement cost approach, so that's the methodology. That is around the valuer looking at quantity and price, and I guess we've been reliant on their view as the experts on price. So I can't answer the specifics of your question, but I'm just trying to lead you through that logic as to how we get comfort to propose this to you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Edge.
Just thanks, David. Just a couple of questions, really on that table 3, item 20, and I think it is further through in the report, but fairly expensive costs for the Type 1 and Type 2 tree planting programs. And I know that's a combination of the actual tree planting exercise and the tree, but it also structural stuff in terms of wire concrete blocks, all of those sorts of things. So it's quite a big effort. In terms of doing that, I suppose it's something that we do in terms of trying to protect our surrounding landscape beside rivers. But when we lose it, it's even though it's a decreased cost, the cost of replacing that in a storm event, for example, is pretty significant. In the May 21 floods, we lost about 42 kilometres of forestry and river protection. And I suppose it begs the question, we don't really have to ask it now, but begs the question of, is it an appropriate form of protection when it's basically, if it's 42 Ks and this is $300 a metre, it's a really expensive business. When we're valuing it at nearly $1 billion, so that's, but it's, the report does describe that. The report also describes quite a lot of things, and I did have quite a few questions on the forestry part of it. The other question in terms of table 4 was the valuation of the forestry assets, which have sort of reduced in value from 19 to 15. Can you explain what that amounts to, and what are the main causes for that?
I think that's why you've got an expert report which tries to do that. I mean, I'd just be reading exactly what you're reading. In particular, the forestry one is a discounted cash flow methodology. So in particular, that one is impacted more strongly by the cost base, the pricing, particularly as noted, I think, in the paper on...
Rather than going through a whole lot of questions on forestry, it's a pretty big paper, and obviously there's an expert done this for us. I'm wondering if in the new councillors in the new year, perhaps a workshop or something to explain to councillors about how, or an explanation from the forestry person who's evaluated this, of the general protection. So it's kind of like this stuff. In terms of valuations and things, and the mechanisms that we use. But there's potentially an opportunity going forward to look at the whole of, we're now looking at the whole of river system, and seeing how we manage our rivers, which is obviously big assets, not necessarily generating huge income, but at huge expense, and the vulnerability thing. So, I mean, I just thought, whether you want to note that, I don't know, but I think rather than sort of going and drilling down into item by item, that perhaps we look at it a bit more comprehensively next year.
Yeah, happy to note that. I mean, I'm not sure whether that is for the Audit and Risk Committee, or whether just in general as council, if you want to look strategically at your forestry, at your flood protection, including forestry assets, et cetera, and whether a valuation and the valuation and replacement cost component of that would be something that council, I'm sure, would probably want to look at. So maybe it could be noted the incoming council may want to consider what its strategy is around forestry and flood protection in that regard. Yeah. And again, any specific questions on valuation can be answered, and we're very happy to go to the valuer if you have some specific detailed questions, not for today, but that you want followed. Thank you. I do have a couple of councillors, but I'll come to you, Grant, if you want to make a comment on that, please.
Yeah, just a quick comment, thanks. Coming in fresh, you pick up these valuation reports, they're pretty complex, they're quite large, but you can see from the table that the discount is coming from harvesting and other movements. I mean, at face value, you see that, but what lies beneath? And I think because of the complexity, it's probably good to have a separate session at some point where you get those valuers in, a bit like Bancorp, when they can talk about all the ins and outs, rather than the accountants try to simulate what it should be or what it might be. Just a suggestion. Kia ora.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Swiggs, I think you had a question, and then I'll come back to Councillor Southworth.
Yes, it could be brief, and it will tie into what Councillor Edge was saying. So we're going to have that session about what we're going to bring into the next council. So write that down on your list of things. But I'm interested in the ETS evaluation's great that it's gone up, but is that now? It might be a dumb question, but is that just paper value money? Because it's costing us $210,000 a year of real money to participate in the scheme. Are we getting any real money out of this at this stage? And I know we had a paper about this a long time ago, and I can't remember exactly where we were at with it. So I don't know if it's a question that can be answered here, but I just wanted to, are we getting any real money out of it, given that we're spending 210 grand a year on being in it?
So the question I can answer here, which is the valuation, and in this case, the valuation is based on a market rate and not a great liquid primary market, but we're relying on a secondary market. All that we've done here is take the surplus credits, drawn out of the forestry valuation and looked for the valuation. I can't answer the other aspect. This is focused on a valuation here.
There might be something to come back to us at some stage, maybe tie it in, because it is useful to understand.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Councillor, I think we could add that to Councillor Edge's suggestion that perhaps there's a session at some point around the forestry assets, including the ETS-related assets, the carbon credits, and how that process works, how the valuation works, whether there's cash flows out, and how that it would be useful for the incoming council probably to be familiar with that. So I think that would be part of a general workshop on forestry and related assets. Yeah.
Yeah, no, if it's possible, it would be really good, because the ETS is kind of looking like it's a futuristic thing, and what do we do with it? Do we increase, so it's land use activity on our land and all that sort of thing too. So yeah, having a comprehensive session about that would be great.
Okay, so if we could perhaps note, please, that that's been recommended from this committee for the incoming council.
So Grant,
thank you. Okay, you good? And apologies for the noise outside, and if those online can hear that, there's some window cleaning going on outside, which is a little noisy, so I do apologise if there's background noise for those that are listening in. Councillor Southworth.
Thank you. On page 42 of our report, and paragraph 47 about the Karakia land ownership, we've established that some land that we thought was our responsibility isn't. It's with Lynn's, and it talks about us not being legally permitted to license certain blocks of land. In transferring the land now, or recognising it's definitely with Lynn's, is there anything that we've done or licensed in the time that we thought it was ours that remains as a sort of residual risk to us?
That's a good question. Look, we will take that one away, and with the General Counsel work through that. The advice as written in the paper is that, as you can see, in 2002 we did take it. 2002, yes, we did take advice on our position.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because on one hand it's been sold for now and it's off the balance sheet, but that doesn't mean to say it couldn't happen again or hasn't. So it's good to look at that and take the learnings from it, right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Grant or Dave, that you want to go other than the valuation? So we've sort of morphed into some of the other parts of that same paper, if you like. Anything else you want to call out in regards to any of those other items?
I don't think so. I think take the rest as read. These were just for, again, trying to give you a bit of a complete view of the balance sheet positions in advance of the audit, and then coming back for the recommendation paper on the financial statements.
Yeah. So just bearing in mind for committee members, these are sort of fundamentally important estimates and judgments that are forming part of what's going into the financial statements. Various judgments. Dave, you were going to give Dave, you're going to give an update on the one valuation that was outstanding.
Yeah, I thought I'd done that actually.
Oh, sorry, you did. You talked about
80 million uplift.
Yes, can you talk us through that?
So that valuation is for the land reserves and buildings, and one of the most material ones will be this building, the valuation of that. So we haven't got any details on that. We've just got a headline number that is showing around about an 80 million or 15% uplift, and you'll see what that means in the paper in terms of 80 million over the number in the table that's written there, which is 515 million.
So it is substantial.
Pretty significant.
It's a pretty significant. So that once that report has landed, it will be circulated?
Look, that's what we'd prefer to do, actually, because, again, it's trying to help you and your judgments leading into that 1 October next meeting.
I'd certainly like to see it. I'm just check with others. I think it should be circulated once you've had it in final form and the version that's going to the auditors. I think it would be useful if it could be circulated to the committee, please. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Southworth.
Sorry, just to clarify in terms of the valuation on the embankments, that's literally about 850 mil. That's specifically the cost it would cost to replace those, to put them back in place if they weren't, or put them in place if they weren't there, isn't it? It's not the value of them. The value of them is in the protection of the assets and the like that are not affected by the flooding that would otherwise occur.
Yeah, you're correct. It's a depreciated replacement cost methodology, so it is depreciated off the quantity times the quantity. But yes, it doesn't value, because of that methodology, the wider value benefit, if that's your question. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Grant?
Yeah, I was just going to add, it's essentially an accounting value rather than a replacement cost, which could be quite different. So, yeah, the books versus the actual putting it back again how it was.
Okay, thank you. So just confirming from the committee point of view, any further questions on either the valuations or any of the provisions, the discussion around the Holiday Act remediation, the contingent liabilities, Riskpool, etc. Anything else anyone wants to cover off on that before we move on? No? Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll go back to the recommendations. They are on page 33. There was a small amendment made to point 4 that was in the papers. There was some wording that needed to just be clarified to get point 4 correct, and you'll see there in red in point 4 the changes. It just read before that it would become available. Becomes not available, so it wasn't quite right. So the word's been removed so that the English actually reads correctly for point 4. So the motion is that we receive the key accounting issues paper for the year ended 30 June 2025. We receive the available valuation report for flood protection and control works, the available valuation report for forestry assets, and we note that the valuation report on land reserves and buildings will be circulated to the committee when it becomes available at the end of August, or as soon as it's available, basically. And that the valuation amounts for all 3 of those valuations will be included in the draft financial statements that will be prepared, presented to audit and provided for the annual report. Do I have someone to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Ward first this time. Seconded, Councillor Swiggs. All those in favour? Aye, thank you. Carried. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, we'll move to the 8.2, assurance update for August, and I'd invite Curtis, our Manager Risk Assurance and Security, to introduce his report, please. Welcome, Curtis.
Tēnā koutou. Thank you, Chair. So the assurance update, there are a few components within this report, but from a material basis, it seeks endorsement from the committee for the updated internal audit charter, and also seeks endorsement of the updated assurance framework, which essentially go hand in hand, both of which we've taken considerable feedback on, both in the last meeting and subsequent. So I do want to acknowledge the feedback that's come through there, and do feel as though we've struck a good balance in terms of helping us move forward and ensuring that that appropriate assurance is in place. The balance of the paper, just before I take comments and questions, also includes a couple of reports that have come through as part of our broader assurance framework. So if you have specific questions around those, I'll seek the relevant director to join the table and answer those questions. But I do think it's important just to acknowledge that these are good examples of the assurance framework in action, that actually we undertake a significant broad range of assurance across the organisation, and that's what the assurance framework tries to entail. And as we move forward, the basis of the discussion here will be a risk-based assurance plan, which will include how we consider and capture that broad range of activities. So I'll pause there and welcome any questions or comments on the paper.
Thank you, Curtis. And we'll start with the charter, because that's the one that does have a recommendation for adoption, and there has been quite some discussion on it already. And there is actually an amendment suggested already to section 9 of that, which I'd just like to call out now so that people are aware that when we get to the resolution to adopt the charter, the recommendation will include some amendments to that Clause 9, or specifically clauses 9.2 and 9.3, and so I'll just put those on screen now. Effectively, we are adjusting clause 9.1 to read, to support effective governance and uphold the principles of the Local Government Act, the chair, based on discussions with members of the committee and both internal and external audit, may decide to hold private sessions with key assurance providers at the end of each meeting without management present. These sessions promote open communication, reinforce independence and support the committee's oversight responsibilities. At least one such session should be held annually, or will be held annually, sorry. And along with that, we've added a recommendation for discussion that this committee recommends that the Canterbury Regional Council directs that the initial external assessment of the internal audit function be commenced no later than 2 years from the date on which the internal audit charter is adopted. So that's in reference to a clause in the charter which refers to an external review at least every 5 years. This would be making a recommendation to Council that the initial review occurs no later than 2 years from when this charter is adopted. So just want to make those points clear. They will be part of the motions when we get to that point. So happy to start taking questions. Councillor Swiggs, I think you were first, please.
Not on the charter, though.
Questions on the charter?
No, I don't have a question on the charter.
Okay, can we just take charter first, if that's okay, and then we'll carry on with other parts of the report. So does anyone have any other comments? Councillor Robinson online, I have you with some comments on the charter, please.
Yes, as alluded to earlier, I just want to make sure that, because I actually agree with these amendments, so I would like to tease out that the appropriateness and necessity of some of the appointments sought by members of Audit Risk, that they be addressed, accordingly, and that they are the appointment or the seeking for clarification from independent members of audit be actually dealt with, in a way that makes it accessible for those members. I'm probably going down a bit of a rabbit hole here. Sorry, I've just got a really bad connection in Dunedin. Sorry, so I've only just uploaded the agenda properly. However, I just want to make sure that the appointments needed are actually made available, and if not, there would be another alternative measure for those people who have concerns or want to bring up something specific to those parties. I just want to note that, even if that's possible, secretarial note.
Okay, thank you. So just I think if I understand the point that you're raising, Councillor, the two things I would say is, one, that the charter has sought to make sure there's a very clear process around whether there are any professional perspective or opinion matters that need resolving, so that should there be an internal audit that's conducted and there are professional disagreements, shall we say, around the findings, there's a very clear process now in the charter as to how that would be documented and how it would be escalated should either party, so either the internal auditor or the manager or department that's being audited, has a disagreement. There's much more clarity now, I think, around how that would be escalated right through to the point where, if need be, it is reported independently to the Chair of Audit and Risk, so there is an opportunity for that escalation to come through to the point where that is made. Clearly, if that was to happen, the Chair of Audit and Risk at that point would likely wish to have some auditor-only time with the full committee to discuss how that had occurred, because it's obviously something you wouldn't want to occur on a regular basis. Yeah. So hopefully, there's that process. And there's just the general reminder that, of course, as much as you don't like it to be required or utilised, there is the protected disclosure regime, whereby if any employee has an issue they do not feel comfortable raising with management or anyone within the organisation, they have the opportunity to use that mechanism at any time for that matter, and it could come, for example, through to the Chair of Audit Risk. I'm currently dealing with another council where that's in fact what's happened. There's been a protected disclosure directly to the independent Chair of Audit and Risk. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just for clarity too, though, that making sure that it's not just appropriate for employees, but it's also appropriate measure for, I guess, council at times and governance. So just making note of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any questions then? Any other further comments on the charter or the recommendations that are currently there in relation to the charter? We'll go back to the other things. I just want to get the charter part agreed first, please.
Just to say, I asked some questions this morning, and the amendment or the revised recommendations completely
Cover that. Okay, thank you. Councillor Edge,
You want to comment? I don't have a question, but
you're welcome to make a brief comment if you don't have a question.
no, I'll wait till for discussion.
Okay. Anybody else got any further comments on that at this point? Okay, well, let's go to the other parts of the paper before we move to the actual resolution, if that's okay. Curtis, is there anything else you want to comment on specifically in the other parts of the 8.2?
Nothing specific. I'll happy to take questions, and again, as they relate to specific reports, I'll ask the relevant director to join the table.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's talk about the assurance framework. Does anyone have any specific comments on that? Yes, Councillor Swiggs.
No, my question's around the maritime New Zealand audit.
Okay, just hold for that. That's next. That's next. Does anyone have anything on the framework? Oh, sorry, Councillor Robinson, are you going to hand up? Is that in relation to the framework?
No, sorry, I should take it down. However, I will have one in a minute once I've read it again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back to you. Okay, we'll move on then to the action summary updates. Anyone have any questions on that? No? So we'll then move to the maritime report and Councillor Swiggs.
Yes. So I'm really pleased to see, obviously, that there is no non-conformities in raised. But there were a couple of points that were raised in the report, and one that sort of got my eye was the observations relating to the emergency drills and training. Obviously, that has been an maritime person that's absolutely critical for health and safety, and a whole lot of other that potentially is. And is there any reporting back that we can get through maybe a health and safety update somewhere down the track around that? Because that's quite critical.
Thank you. Welcome, Tim. Are you happy to answer that?
Excuse me. Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor. More than happy to provide that assurance when it comes through. Where it's referring to the drills, it's referring actually to the documentation that those have been done. So I can assure you that they have been done. It's just that we didn't have the documentation into CFlux, which is the software, as you say, at that time, and we're working our way through that. I don't have a timeline right now that I could give you, but I'm happy to come back with that, and as I say, more than happy to provide that through, and it would probably come through in the health and safety update.
That's cool. Thank you.
Happy? Thank you. Councillor Karakia?
Mihi kia koe te tio mana. I have a question, and thank you for persevering with at the pre meeting. And I'm just going to ask this question as we discussed at the pre-meeting. At page 160, the recent assurance activity, and the assurance activity in regards to the Tiriti partnership audit. I just really would like to know what is the progress on that, understanding that when we meet, or when whoever's going to sit in this seat meets at the next triennium, that this is going to actually be sort of put into that triennium. So I just really need to know and I'm particularly relating this to the cultural audit, which we're calling now the Tiriti Partnership Audit, which is good. It's better word, better title. So yeah, it'd be good to have an update on what the progress is on this thing.
Thank you. You're welcome, Dave.
Kia ora, through you, Chair. Tēnā tātou katoa. Tēnā koe, Councillor Korako. Yes, so we've been making good
progress on what we call our Whiria Te Muka Tiriti Partnership Assessment rubric or tool. Just to perhaps recap, there was a working group of audit and risk, I think came together end of last year, and we worked through the Whiria Te Muka assessment tool that we proposed to use for assessing maturity of Te Tiriti Partnership, and there was endorsement for us to continue down that pathway. In parallel to that, as you will be aware, councillors, Ngaitahu councillors, along with constituent councillors, have been out with Papatapu Runanga asking quite specific questions about what does Te Tiriti Partnership look like, feel like, to ensure that the way we evaluate Te Tiriti Partnership maturity reflects actually what the partner also sees from that perspective. So we've gathered a lot of information as we've gone through those Papatapu Runanga conversations, and also in parallel to that, Council have also been updating the 2-year agreement, which is now 12 years old, and that agreement is being updated also in the context of what the current view of Te Tiriti Partnership looks like. So with all of those moving parts in play, we've been ensuring that the rubric and the way in which we develop metrics reflect actually what the partnership expects of itself. So we've got that rubric drafted. We're hoping as a next stage, following my work with my executive leadership team colleagues, that we can have a discussion with Te Rōpū Tuia, which is the next meeting of that is in September, to share that internal rubric for how we evaluate Te Tiriti Partnership, and then following that, bring it to an ARC meeting for adoption. So good progress being made, and I'm excited by the rubric metrics. They will be insightful for the organisation, and looking forward to sharing that soon. Thank you for that. Very good answer. Can I just check likely timing of when it would come? As we set out in the paper, it will be the first meeting of for ARC in the new triennium of council. Appreciate people may change around the table, but wanted to ensure that what we landed was robust and reflective of where the agreement reset is currently being worked through. Thank you, Councillor. You okay with that?
Yep, absolutely. So just where this thing sits in the whole scheme of things, I would think, okay, so in the charter, that's another part of this, but then what am I trying to say here? Once we have the report back and then it's presented to ARC, then from there, if it's adopted, where does it sit? It sits in here so that we can monitor it or do what our committee does?
Yeah, I would anticipate that recommendations would go through to full council, and then anything that comes out of that from a monitoring perspective, further reviews, dates, for example, for further reviews or updates would be part of an agreed process, and they would then come back via ARC to ensure that those reviews are happening, they're on time, and any recommendations that come out of them are being followed.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you. Any further questions then on the assurance framework, the maritime, before I shift on to the science report? Anything else on the maritime? No. Science report? Councillor Southworth?
Thank you. Good to see the report and very positive. There's two questions that I have. On page 4 of the report, it talks about the experience and broader perspective of external peer reviewers. Oh, good. I thought you might be answering these things, Fiona. Page 4, or 189 of this. There's a, where would it be, second paragraph up from the bottom, roundabout in the middle. It says the experience and broader perspective of external peer reviewers is particularly important in ensuring both scientific credibility and a current context for the work. And I'm just wondering, do you understand or can you explain to me what's meant by broader perspective and what the sort of implications of that are?
Kia ora, Councillor Southworth. Thank you for your question. As you are aware, this report was prepared by Dr. Jenny Webster-Brown, and so my understanding of her comment there that relates to the broader perspective of external peer reviewers is often our external peer reviewers are perhaps at a university or a consultancy, and through the nature of their work have a broader perspective across the board rather than potentially our science staff who are very focused on the issues related to the expertise.
So I think maybe my question really is in understanding what's implied by that phrase, does that then have an implication for who we're selecting or how we select external reviewers? It sounds quite important. It's sort of suggesting that's a key part of the external reviewers, sort of credentials is their broader perspective. And so what's the implication for that in terms of selecting external reviewers? And are we sure we're capturing what Jenny Webster, and apologies to be asked, I had assumed that Jenny Webster-Brown would be able to answer the questions directly. I didn't realise that she wouldn't be here or online. So I'm putting you on the spot, but I think it's important to get to the nub of what that's saying to understand what that means in terms of, our selection of an external. It's about the external reviewers, which we ultimately select those. So what is she saying about who we choose and how, and what credentials are we looking at in making those decisions? It would be good to capture what she means and then try to turn that into some criteria.
So from my understanding of the way our process runs, I'm really confident in the way we select appropriate external reviewers for the report at hand. And I'm not sure, without speaking to Jenny about this specific point, I think her intent is really to note the importance of having credible external peer reviewers, so people who are obviously familiar with the relevant topic and have experience in a range of relevant areas, are up to date with the current context that the work would be grounded in. So we'll certainly look into that as part of our overarching review, just to make sure that we're absolutely streamlining this process.
So then, in the report that we've got in this, the full report, there aren't like recommendations in there, like explicitly pulled out, and there are just two, and I totally get that for the very most part, this is really excellent, very affirmative. We're doing a really good job in this. So but my role in this committee is to pick some holes. And I was a little surprised not to see some specific recommendations, because there are a couple of points in here. So in that same paragraph I just quoted from, it says, failure to limit the scope of their review can make the task of the external reviewers more difficult and time consuming. I think it's relating to the externals. So there's something to pick up on and look at what do we do about setting timeframes in these processes. And another one a bit further on, again, no constraints on the time that may be taken to complete each review of the step, and that means that the report may not be as useful as it could otherwise be had it been turned around more timely. So there's some things in here that can be pulled out that could be put into bullet pointed recommendations to then go and see, how can we improve on what is clearly for the most part, a very good and positive report. So I just would really seek that happens, and I don't know if there's a reporting mechanism or just needs to be noted to do that.
I'm happy to, if you're happy to note that feedback's been provided from the committee, that, looking at that report, I agree, it's a positive report, but there are some things in there that could be considered when reviewing the next opportunity for a review.
And then on page 192 of our big pack, or page 7 of Jenny's report, in the top paragraphs, it's under ECAN's current science report review process, and in the top paragraph, it says the protocols are intended to apply only to reports authored by ECAN staff, not to reports commissioned by ECAN from consultants. And I'm just wondering, so is there a whole different process of assessing the report, the reports that come back from external consultants? Like, how do we make sure that their work is on a par with our level of expectation if we're not going through similar protocols to what we apply to our own peer review? So how do we do that? Is that something different, or is that something we need to look at as well?
So thank you very much for your feedback, and just a comment in relation to the timeframes element that you've identified as an opportunity for improvement. That's certainly one that we're across. In terms of the way that we apply these protocols, this was an assurance report that we sought to relate to our own peer review process. For any other consultancies or agencies who we commission to do work, they have their own assurance processes by which their reports are reviewed under whatever their terms are. They're typically approved by a chief scientist or similar senior manager, and I think it would be inappropriate for us to require something of another agency. When we scope pieces of work to be produced elsewhere, that work is clearly scoped, the work is contracted, the report is provided as a deliverable from that. Of course, our team would ask questions along the way if they have any concerns or can provide any other relevant information, but we are in that case reliant on their assurance processes being effective.
So if I can ask a question, because if we're going out to get work come in, we want to be able to stand by what we're ultimately, it's on us as well, someone else's reports that we're commissioning. So I'm hearing you, but also our reputation relies on good data that we're using, and if it's provided by somebody else, do we not need some sort of assurance process, or is it through our procurement process, or somewhere in the where in the mix is there that gives us confidence? Do we check the review process of external consultants to make sure that they're broadly comparable? And I know in this report it talks about the fact that we do have particularly high standards, and our review process means we are on average at least as good as, if not better than others. But if we're then going out and getting work done on our behalf or to support our work, surely we need to have some confidence that that's up to the standard that we would expect were we doing it ourselves. And where's the measures to have some degree of assurance of that?
Yeah, thank you. I'll let you respond to that in a second. I've got councillors all over the place. But I think, Carolyn, you might have wanted to just make a comment on that particular point around...
No, I think that, as I understand what you're saying, it's part of your contracting procurement process that you would expect the standards of your provider to be consistent with the purpose for which the report was commissioned, and they would have that. So I think you're right, it's part of the procurement process, and that in itself would specify the standards that you would expect depending on the purpose. Because my only comment, I mean, this is a commendable report. I did wonder if there is kind of an efficiency lens as well as to whether it's worth reflecting on the particular purpose of each report, because there's a trade-off in terms of timeliness and comprehensiveness. And some of the externally published reports that are intended to provide publicly available authoritative data sets of a long shelf life, one might expect the highest possible standards. But papers that might be looking at timely decision-making might not have to go through such a rigorous process, and whether there is value in some kind of differentiation depending upon the purpose of the report, its shelf life, the nature of the decisions that the report will be used for, and the attendant risk profile that you might expect to attach to it, so that you are getting an efficiency lens as well as a quality lens.
Okay, thank you. And I think that is an element around procurement, but yeah, I'll just let you respond to that.
Thank you very much for the comment there. And so this assurance report focused specifically on our science reports, which is the sort of highest reporting and potentially associated risk that we have. We do have a couple of other mechanisms of producing science information. We have a science summary, science advice that are essentially expedited for efficiency and in situations where there is arguably less risk involved. So that's absolutely valid. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I had Councillor Swiggs, then Councillor Robinson, and then Councillor Karakia. So I'll take them in that order if that's okay. Councillor Swiggs.
Yeah, I was just curious about the comments around the long drawn out process in which reports may no longer be as useful as anticipated by the time it's published. That comment kind of worries me as a councillor. We're asking for reports often, and it is a common issue that we come up with, timeliness, and when I see that the timeliness may make it less useful, what are we doing to address that?
Thank you, Councillor Swiggs. It's really echoes Councillor Southworth's point, and as it has been noted in this report, we don't currently specify timeframes for each step of our review process. So that is one piece that we're actively working on to define what those are and ensure people work within them.
Is there any time frame where we can get something back on that? Because that is. I mean, I can think of three things in the back of my mind that I know that we're waiting on, that have taken a while. So is there any time frame or report back on that particular issue around timeliness of getting reports as a council? If we ask it or commission something, how long, is there any time frame on getting something in that space?
Just to clarify there, are you talking about broader reports to council or specifically science reports?
The ones that I've got are science-based reports. So I don't know, there might be a distinction, but they are based on science data, gathering data, doing reports and giving us information so that we can make decisions. Because it's all part of the decision-making process, so they all ultimately land in the same place.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Robinson?
Still wondering, is there a time frame?
Yeah, I
for
hope
us
you
to
can hear
address
me
that?
okay.
Is there a response to that, please?
Thank you. We will come back to you and provide additional assurance of the steps that we have taken following receipt of this report.
Perfect, thank you. Very good. Now, Councillor Robinson online.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. It's been quite patchy listening in, so I hope it's not reciprocated on the way for you. So I have the same sort of, I guess, questions as Councillor Southworth, but I just wanted to tease out the list of potential reviewers that is held by Environment Canterbury, and because there's certain elements and committees that we utilise external, say, hearings commissioners, and we have lists of people, and potentially looking at the list alone reflects potential concerns or conflicts. At least we can see something that we can at least manage as visual. I'm wondering if there's the same thing that could apply or does apply internally that could be made available to audit risk from the review process of external reports.
Thank you. Response to that?
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. We don't hold a list of reviewers as such, because for any given report, it is a case-by-case decision as to who throughout the country, or potentially at times further afield, is best qualified to provide a thorough, comprehensive review of the work at hand.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, is that...
I can understand that. But I guess I would like noted that it might be a possibility to at least have a pool of people for at least those who aren't part of this process. also, I just wanted to address, I guess, the sequence of the current review process with regards to, report writer right down to you as chief scientist. I guess, is there the ability within there with, knowing urgency sometimes and, things being expedited, has there been an issue in the past of things being potential really important elements of reports being removed or cut or, concerns along the way that have been addressed later in that sort of assessment of the report's efficacy? If you're able to.
I'm not sure I completely understand your question, sorry. Are you asking?
No, that's okay. No, sorry. I guess because sometimes reports are necessary with swiftness. Has there been in the past, or do you know of any part of that whole sequence of 1 to 6 being report righted to you or whoever as chief scientist? Has there been issues with elements of the report being peer reviewed to the point that they are no longer fit for purpose in your eyes or staff eyes?
Thank you for clarifying. No, there are no cases that I'm aware of where through the process the report has no longer become fit for purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Karakia.
Kia ora. I know we've had a lot of time on this, but I just wondered where Mātauranga Māori sits in, this whole scheme of things.
Kia ora, Councillor Karakia. So these reports are reports that have been prepared by Environment Canterbury staff. And for us, we're very respectful of mātauranga being held by runanga. And so we are cognizant of data sovereignty issues. We absolutely respect the need to protect mātauranga, but we would not be looking to review mātauranga, so to speak, as that information is held by runanga.
Yeah, supplementary, yes.
Thank you for that response to that question. But I if we're looking at all of this, and I know it's about silent files, it's about a number of things, but there are examples where we have used Mātauranga Māori actually in reporting, and particularly if you go to the Onuku Marae, how when you look at that mapping process, we've actually used some of that. So I suppose, is that correct in what I'm saying? That's the first thing, because the next question would be, can you be half pregnant in this? Sorry. You either do it or you don't do it. And I know that we can use this whole situation about, there are some that actually believe in the data sovereignty in that, but there's still I suppose the bigger discussion that we've had a number of times, where does Mātauranga Māori that we know of, that there are papatupu out there that actually do agree to share it, because it actually creates more of an understanding inside of Environment Canterbury about what we're trying to actually achieve in scientific data.
Thank you. I think it'd be great to have a conversation separately with that to understand how we best ensure data are appropriately protected.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, can I just confirm, I can see your hands up electronically. Do you have a further question?
No, sorry, it's my end. Sorry.
No, all good. Just wanted to check. Okay, if there's no further questions, I'm happy to put the motion as is on screen, and then we'll have further opportunity for discussion. It's a fairly long set of motions there. So we're endorsing the updated Internal Audit Charter with the amendments as noted, particularly around clause 9.1 and deletion or removal of clauses 9.2 and 9.3 as were in the papers. Recommending that the Canterbury Regional Council directs that the initial external assessment of the internal audit function be commenced no later than 2 years from the date on which the internal charter is adopted, which would hopefully be at the next council meeting. Endorses the updated assurance framework summarised, receives and notes the assurance management action summary updates, and receives the Maritime New Zealand audit report and the assessment findings of the science report peer review process. That is the motion. I'm happy to open it for discussion. Councillor Edge. You happy to move? Thank you. Someone happy to second? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Then-
Chair. Councillor Pauling. Further discussion?
Just quickly, I'd like to thank staff for its resolution of the charter process. It's a refresh of the previous one we had. It is a lot more clear about the process, and I particularly like the chart, the framework chart, that gives a really clear idea of who does what and the relationships between management, this committee, and so I just want to thank Giles in particular for working on that, because we have looked at that for quite some time, but I'm satisfied that those amendments and our processes going forward will help for that whole process. In terms of those other matters, certainly looking forward to seeing the Te Tiriti audit process coming through as soon as possible. It's a pity it couldn't be done this triennium, but I think I have seen, I was party to the original little working group, and it was a really good, exciting work that they've been doing. So thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other discussion? Councillor Southworth?
Yeah, just to say that it's really good to see the evolution of this work. It's really important to have that assurance side of things, and I can just see how many big steps we've made in particularly this term. And so, yeah, thank you. And particularly, I think, as Councillor Edge acknowledged, Giles, you've clearly taken a big part of this work. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson?
Yeah, I just want to use the word echo. I agree with most of the comments on this today, and agree that Giles has really put this together well, and the efforts also of Councillor Edge on this. Your efforts definitely don't go unnoticed in this, and it's been really refreshing to see this come forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further discussion? We have the motion's been forwarded and seconded. If there's no further discussion, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Carried. Okay, it's 12. Thank you, Curtis. It's 12:30, and we were about to go in, or can in fact go into 8.3, which is the Audit New Zealand interim report. However, before we do that, I have been informed that lunch has arrived, so it may be a good opportunity just to adjourn at this point, if that's okay, and we'll take a lunch break and come back at 1 p.m. Fine. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, those online. Thank you. Right, kia ora and welcome back, everyone. We're up to 8.3 in the agenda, and so I'd like to welcome Chantel, and for the first time, Corbett, who's joining Chantel, to join. I think it's Dave who's coming, Grant, who's coming to talk to the Audit New Zealand Interim report. So, Chantel, you're welcome to take the report as read because it has been circulated, but happy for you to pick up any key points or items that you'd like to highlight, and then I'll ask Dave or Grant to perhaps respond initially, and then we'll put it to discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. In terms of our interim report, the main points I want to raise are obviously this was dated from our interim period, but what we managed to do is we've actually brought a little bit of work forward into the interim audit. So we did some of this work would have traditionally been done at the year-end audit. And what we've done is we've done some early testing on operating expenditure, sensitive expenditure, consent revenue, and capital and asset WIP additions, which is actually very nice. It helps to smooth the flow of the audit. So I just wanted to thank the council for being responsive in terms of working with us to find those bits of work that we were able to do early. There are also a number of new recommendations that we've made from the process, which includes the completeness of the interest register, the notification of suspected fraud cases in compliance with the fraud policy, non-compliance with the sensitive expenditure policy, the no overarching policy for sensitive expenditure, a recommendation around the timely review of policies, timely review of bank reconciliations, and an assessment of service measure 19. We did a fair amount of work around the front-end system documentation of the performance measures this year. Obviously, having been through the LTP last year, you had a full suite of new service measures that we had to work through in terms of gaining an understanding. The one that jumped out at us, just in terms of having appropriate documentation around the methodology that was intended to be followed, was that on service measure 19. But we worked with management with regards to that to try and get something fully documented, and we'll work through that documentation when we come back for final next week. I'm happy to take comments further than that.
Thank you. And councillors will have noted that management have written their responses to the Audit New Zealand recommendations in the paper. So, Dave, I'm happy to default to you at this point if there's anything further you'd like to add before we open up wider for questions. No? Happy with those comments?
Yeah, happy with the comments that we've got in there, and just we'll answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions then of the Audit New Zealand report? Councillor Swiggs.
I have a question, and sorry, I'm trying to find the page here, but there was a question, there was a part in, excuse me, the report that was relating to the inspection of stock banks and the methodology river booms. Sorry, I can't find this on my, it's about 200 and something page. Yeah, that's, there we go. And there were some concerns around the methodology that we were doing. Are there any gaps that haven't been identified from the past? So obviously the audit's looking at now. I'm just worried about further down the track, and I don't know who can answer that question, but when I saw that, I was a little bit like, hang on. I want to have an assurance that yes, it's been picked up now, but has there been anything that's not been picked up in the past?
From our perspective, it was the first time that we've looked at it. This was really around the documentation in terms of how the performance measure was going to be measured. So there was consistency in view in the team members that we spoke to around this. So we believe that it had been consistently applied, but there was nothing written down. So in terms of auditing something where there's no written methodology around it, it became quite difficult for us to assess how the percentage as what was going to be reported with the annual report was going to be measured. how the kilometres, as indicated, were split between stop banks, berms, and other pieces of land that were being reviewed. When it says inspection, what was meant by inspection, what was being checked. So it was about sort of documenting those processes to make sure that going forward as a new performance measure, this was being consistently applied. And if there were updates, we were able to note them through that process.
I suppose the question that's good, and that's good to have that assurance when we're thinking about stock banks and resilience work. But is there any risk that there's been inconsistencies in the way that it has been assessed and handled in the past? Like, what I'm worried about is, were there any stock banks that were assessed under in whatever way they may have been assessed, and have been reported to us as, yep, that's cool, we don't need to invest in that. However, there may be some critical weaknesses or critical issues or something along those lines that we may have not seen, and that might not be picked up until the next time that they were inspected.
From our perspective, we wouldn't be able to answer that question. This is a new performance measure from our view. So...
Okay, thank you. Chief Executive is just, for Councillor Robinson's information, the Chief Executive is just coming forward to help answer that question. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you, Chair and councillors. I just wanted to note that asset management with regard to stock banks are a priority for Te Uru Kahika, in other words, all of the regional and unitary councils of Aotearoa, New Zealand. That asset management and the methodology is right at the top of the list. So we note this through the audit, but there are many more steps we wish to take. Environment Canterbury is second equal in the country in terms of our assessment, so I can assure you, I wish to give you confidence to the answer to your question, Councillor Swiggs. However, I think there is more work to be done, and we know that across the country, and that should be reported back to you, and I'll make sure that the GM does so as we proceed.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. You happy? I've just got a slight sort of follow-up on that particular point. Chantal was, so it's noted that an updated methodology has been provided. I think you said you will look at that at final. Is there a residual risk at the moment, though, that you may not agree with that methodology, and so we'd have a problem with how we've measured and audited the final result?
So what we have done is we've looked at that updated methodology. It was supplied to us sort of as this was all happening. We were comfortable that the gaps that we had identified had been filled. Once we get into the review work, there is a bit of a residual risk, because as we try and understand and look at how it's been documented, whether or not there are any implications that we'll only know once we start looking at the detail. So this is at a high level, so it's around the system documentation around the methodology and the approach that was intended to be taken over the year. Once we start looking at the measure, we'll be able to tell whether or not there are further gaps or not within that process.
Okay, thank you.
I think this is a really good thing. I think it's good that this has been highlighted, and I think this is actually a good thing for us. So, yeah, it's not a bad news story. I think this is really good.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, Giles?
So I'd just like to add to the comments that have been made that actually I think this reinforces the value of the work that was done last year to reinvigorate the impact framework and the service measures, so that this kind of information is front and centre of staff and council's minds in terms of the key things we need to achieve and the methodologies that sit behind it.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Edge?
Yeah, I think it's a really good thing too. It sort of focuses us, but we've done a lot in the river space over the last few months. Braided River Revival, 30-year infrastructure planning, those sort of things. In terms of what you're talking about, it sounds to me like it's like a infrastructure vulnerability kind of approach. And I'm thinking of a recent one done by the South Island Regional Transport Chairs for assessing the vulnerability across the South Island of our transport system. And you kind of think that the metrics involved, and I suppose if you do find some gaps, that that you, for your assessment process, you'll identify those so that it can add to the bigger picture for us, because we are looking at whole of river and the effects of obviously not just the stop banks but associated implications of those. So yeah, I think it's really good. So is that what you've got in mind, something that's comprehensive in nature in terms of ongoing assessment against some measures?
So this is one of the performance measures that we selected from your suite of performance measures that will be presented within the annual report. So what we do is we focus in on what we consider to be the material measures. So what the work that we will be looking at here is around what number is reported within your annual report to ensure that it is consistent with the methodology and is consistent with the expectation of the measure. And if there's further clarification required in terms of making sure that everyone understands. So understandability is also one of the aspects that we work through in terms of performance information.
Great, thank you. Councillor Southworth.
Yeah, just I'd like to ask a question about the completeness of the interest register. And in terms of, so you've identified that there is a need to do some work on that. And in going through the process that you would normally expect, you've actually found that there were some conflicts of interest that hadn't been declared, both by elected members and also senior management personnel. But you've put it into the just necessary category, which means up to 6 months to go through that. And I'm interested in that time frame rather than urgent, particularly given where we are in the council term. So there'll be new councillors coming in. It sort of suggests an understanding around what things are conflicts of interest, or the significance of conflicts of interest as well. And I had somebody just last week asking me about something that's a fairly local issue, just with respect to a councillor who's happens to be on a committee of a community group. And so it does disturb the public and our voters when things don't look right. And so arguably there is a high, I would think, a high reputational risk around this stuff. So I question that, and in a way the management comment sort of puts the onus on the councillors, which to me again feels like sort of pushing the issue away a little. And I just wonder, could you give some commentary on that and yeah, why you've gone for just necessary?
Thank you. There's two aspects with regards to the interest register. So there is the control environment aspect, which is the item that you're talking about making sure that councillors are well prepared in terms of anything they've got to vote on, making sure that those conflicts are all declared when they should be declared. And there are processes within your meetings to be able to make sure that even where something isn't on your interest register, that it's able to be brought to the attention of the attendees at that point in time. We also look at it from the perspective of the annual report, because what we do is we look at any related party transactions in the year, and we are able to do a cross-check with regards to that from an audit perspective, which is why we've said this is a procedure that we believe should be introduced for the next annual audit, to make sure that there is a process to ensure the completeness of the interest register. You're right in terms of the fact that sort of the management comment alludes to the fact that it is the responsibility of the person who is conflicted or has a related party to make that declaration. And that is the expectation of the legislation around this. So the responsibility does rest with each individual in terms of making sure that that interest register is kept up to date. What we have seen with other councils where we've raised this, because the legislation itself only requires you to do it once a year. And the discussions we've had with other councils as to how we can make this more fruitful and useful for the reporting process is to make sure that it's done potentially twice a year, sort of just before year end. First declaration is made, and then thereafter it's done the year after that, which means that you get a midpoint interest register done, and potentially doing another one, although not legislatively required, just before year end to make sure that from a finance perspective you sweep that up.
Tidy up.
Yeah, that would be considered good practice, but making sure that there are reminders that go out around all those items. Management comments are appropriate. They are true. It's about determining as a council how many more controls you want to put in place around these items.
Okay, thank you. You got a supplementary? Yeah.
Just to follow on really around the sort of education side of things, because I don't know if this is a space that you step into or could in your recommendations, but around, how well is it communicated to members about the importance? Because my understanding is you can, if you end up having to go through judicial review, you're talking about substantial sums of money potentially, and delay and impacts on all sorts of things. And I'm just wondering whether there's perhaps a missing piece somewhere in here, and whether that's something that you're able to make a comment on, or whether you do comment on those types of things. I
obviously work for Audit New Zealand, which is within the Office of the Auditor General. And what I have seen take place is the conflicts of interest and the declaration of interest process has been done and offered as a discussion point for the induction of councillors after the election. So we tend to see that happen sort of every 3 years again. And if it is something that ECAN is interested in, I can definitely ask that type of discussion around conflict of interest and where it's important, and when you've got a request for certain, sign-offs from the Office of the Auditor General, etc. That is something we can try and sort of incorporate in your induction process after the elections.
I can actually respond to that. We've already received some offer from the Office of the Auditor General around induction. It's the same offer that was gone out to all councils given the election, and it does actually include specifically some discussion around some support from them explaining conflict of interest, etc., etc. Giles just wants to respond, and then Councillor Robinson, I'll come to you.
Yeah, it's just really to reinforce that we do take conflicts of interest extremely seriously. The policy is currently under review. Part of that is the frequency with which both councillors, but also all staff, but key management staff in particular, should be either reminded or asked to fill in a new declaration without it becoming overly onerous. The reference to the guidance that as part of induction that was done at the start of the last triennium, Auditor General did come. Clearly, there's a lot of material at that point that is provided to new councillors. So some councillors around the table will recall that earlier this year we ran through those policies that are particularly relevant to councillors, and we agreed that as part of the induction of new council we would repeat that process. So not just conflicts of interest, but more broadly those other policies that are relevant, and again those regular reminders. But as we say in our comment, the responsibility for declaring conflicts of interest rests with the individual concerned, although we will do everything we can to support that.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, thanks for this discussion. I think it's quite poignant, actually. And also to Vicky Southworth, I actually concur with a lot of her comments today. Just with regards to, the LAMIA, sort of the rules under that, I know it's primarily under, the councillors to declare pecuniary interests and the likes. But I'm just wondering if in the absence of somebody declaring such a conflict where it is noted by somebody as a pecuniary interest and it's been highlighted as such, I guess my question is, who has the capacity or responsibility to at least acknowledge that or escalate concerns with regards to that?
Giles, are you happy to answer that?
So I think it depends on the circumstances, Councillor. I think that you will recall that earlier this year there was a particular paper related to the development of the Odeon building where it became apparent that some councillors may, and I stress the word may, have a conflict of interest, and I took responsibility for emailing all of councillors reminding them, but that not trying to indicate which councillors or whether they should or shouldn't declare an interest. Clearly, it's a matter for the individual. So there are a number of ways that can occur. Clearly, the overall policy is owned by the General Counsel. But should we be alerted to potential conflicts of interest, or councillors be alerted to potential conflicts of interest at the council table or amongst staff, then we would take whatever action we deemed to be appropriate at the time.
Thank you, Giles. Councillor Karakia.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. I thought that was a really interesting example, and it probably is why we need to actually ensure that correct procedures and that are followed. And I come back to the example that was used, and it was actually a working group. So why would you put members who would make up that working group? Well, it'd be in some ways members of that working group. They'd be councillors, but they'd also have a real good skill base and network, and that's the reason why they're there in some ways. So then there was the next part of it around the procurement. How do you actually attract interested investors to do that without using, the networks or the skills of the members of that working party. So it's a little bit. So this is why, in some ways, we need that, and particularly when working within the public domain. But it, So again, I'm just commenting that it does need something, but also the understanding of kind of what kind of working group is put together. How do you protect them from themselves sometimes?
Thank you. I'm going to get Giles to respond to that. And then Councillor Robinson, apologies, I didn't let you clear before, so I'll come back to you in a moment. Giles?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Karakia. I think that the point you raise is absolutely valid, and that's part of the reason why it's actually quite hard in these circumstances to have black and white rules, because there's a lot of grey. And we need to make sure that we treat each incident on its merits. And I think that the key thing in that incident is not necessarily whether there actually is a conflict of interest, but whether there could be a perception of a conflict of interest. And that's one of the things that individuals need to, and the organisation needs to take into account. Because, as I said, often it's reasonably grey, and we try to err on the side of caution and prudence.
Yeah, thank you. And just a reminder that, of course, this is a lot about the declaration of the conflict or the potential conflict. The measures you may take to mitigate risk around that is a separate issue, but it starts with the declaration or the observation of the conflict. Sorry, I know we've got some people with hands up. Councillor Robinson, I'll come to you, and then I'll come back to others.
Yeah, sorry. Mine was just to follow on from what I was mentioning before, but actually what Giles has mentioned is quite important too. And I think the actual subject of that discussion was actually non-pecuniary. But what I'm meaning is if it's really clear that there's a pecuniary interest and a benefit from somebody, and it's known to be such, I think that really needs to be highlighted well before the discussion or the direction is taken. So that was my point, follow on from my comments before. So that's all from me, sorry. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. I think I had Councillor Ward, then Councillor Edge, and then Carolyn, and we'll go in that order. So Councillor Ward.
Well, I'd just like to follow on from what Councillor Karakia said, and Giles, I mean, sometimes, like the Odeon, if you want some expertise around the table, there are people that have been involved, like in property development. So where do you draw the line? And I guess the other comment I'd like to make is, as a councillor, I've updated my pecuniary interests every 4 months. But, if still been challenged about it. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that does reiterate the point about it being acknowledging the conflict and then coming up with ways to manage it. So having experts and people who may have had other involvement isn't in itself precluding them from being involved. It's just how do you manage the risk around the fact that they may have other conflicts and relationships.
If you excluded those people, then you're not capitalising on the expertise that those people bring to this table.
Correct. You may not get the best outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Edge.
Yeah, just quickly changing the topic there. Page 222, the previous recommendations, and the one of them's the improvement over the internal controls for GIS system 2022. Is that statement specifically referring to just picking up in the field structures that we have in place, like culverts or those sorts of things? Is that what's the scope of that?
And actually, I had to follow up on that. So it's a good question, Grant. I had to follow up just to confirm those two dates there, 2022. So just where we would expect some, action or movement on those, given we're now in 2025.
I'm happy to comment. So the reason these ones have sort of been long outstanding is because they were identified through the last valuation process. And it is difficult for us to clear it. Sorry, I have a midlife eyesight problem.
It's a few of us.
So I look like I'm sort of looking down my nose at everyone every 5 minutes. These recommendations all came out of the valuation work we did in 2022, which was the last valuation cycle. For us to be able to determine whether or not these actually have been implemented, require us to go through the next valuation cycle for clearing, which is this year. So we'll actually work through that. We did make some recommendations in terms of what the formal policy should include, and we will check that, and these will either be removed or updated to reflect whatever the specific items are within this valuation cycle.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dave, did you want to comment any further on that?
I would say that one of the topics on page 222 was one that we've discussed earlier in the day. So it has been cleared. And in my understanding of the first one, it's a very, very challenging area around management of data, reconciling between different systems, whether they be GIS, wider asset management, accounting, fixed asset registers. Exceedingly challenging to do because all have slightly different purposes. And I think that's at the root of this first one.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to go back to the previous item in terms of conflicts of interest, because I think it's an important issue to reflect on, that the obligation to disclose is individual because that's where the information sits. The responsibility to manage a disclosure is collective. And I think it's one of those things in terms of putting it in the context of an induction that there is an inherent tension between managing the skill set and networks and that people bring to the table. And the best way of doing that is early disclosure. And in my experience, the most difficult conflicts to manage are perceived conflicts. Actual conflicts can be relatively easily ring-fenced. Perceived conflicts are vulnerable to anybody's interpretation at any one time, particularly after the event when they don't like the outcome. And the best way to protect both the individual and the collective process is early disclosure and then collective management. One way that councillors might think about it is that by early disclosure, you are effectively transferring the risk of you managing that alone to the collective managing how they wish to strike the balance between the contribution you make to the process and the nature of the risk associated with whatever your declared interest is. So I think it's a really good topic of conversation, but it's worth thinking about how you frame it in a way that recognises individual obligation to disclose, collective responsibility to manage.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. Grant.
Thanks for that. Just wanted to add on to that point as well, because I've been thinking about this as we've talked through things. I think one of the biggest gaps I've seen in different organisations is the danger of assumption. So people not disclosing because actually this is just a company for my family business. It's got nothing to do with ECAN. so I won't disclose it. And that's when the online registered checks happen, because auditors and others, they go and check the source, and then they raise a problem. So I think it's just really important to be really clear that, let's just disclose it anyway, no matter what.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we're all agreed that it'll be an important part of the induction process, and I think, as you said, Giles, the policy around it's going to be reviewed anyway, so that will include frequency of comms and other things. So very topical point. Thank you. Any further then questions at this stage before I put the motion in relation to the receiving the Audit New Zealand interim report? No? Okay. I'm happy to have the motion. Can we have the motion up on screen, please? Thank you.
Happy to move it.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Happy to move that we receive the Audit New Zealand report. We endorse the new recommendations and associated management comments in relation to the matters that are itemised there from 2.1 to 2.7, and note that the final audit report for Council is intended to be presented to the Audit and Risk Committee at the first available committee meeting post the adoption of the annual report. Everybody clear on that? We have a mover. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Southworth. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Chantal, and the team from Audit New Zealand. And thank you, Dave, and management. Okay. We're on to item 9 on the agenda, which is the Audit and Risk Committee Resolution Status Report. It's in the paper, it's in the pack, but Giles, would you like to talk to that, please?
Everything has been completed. Obviously, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on what's a relatively small paper, but it has all been cleared? No, if there are no questions, then I'll move the resolution that the Audit and Risk Committee notes the status of previous resolutions provided in the Audit and Risk Committee Resolution Status Report as at August 2025. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Edge. Seconded, Councillor Ward. Those in favour? All right, thank you. Carried. 9.2, Committee Work Plan and Policy Update. I'd ask Curtis to come back to the table, please, Curtis, to talk us through the work plan and the policies update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a standard item on the agenda. I'll take the paper as read, and happy to take questions or comments on the items.
Any questions on either of those two? No. That's easy, Curtis. Okay. If that being the case, I will put the resolution then that the Audit and Risk Committee endorses the Forward Committee Work Plan and endorses the status of Council and corporate policies, including those policies that are scheduled to be approved before the next ordinary meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee, anticipated to be in November or December 2025. Put the motion. Any further discussion on that? Happy to move. Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Someone happy to second?
Yeah.
Councillor Edge, any further discussion? Yes, Councillor Edge.
Just two things really, just picking up item 6 on page 229, talking about policy. These documents basically deal with those sort of issues, identifying policies and some time frames. And also just wanted to point out the fraud policy, which I think is slightly out of date in terms of editing and things like that, is due for an update in January 26. So that's an important one coming through.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good one to note. Any further discussion then? We had a mover. Do we have seconded? We did? All right, those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? Thank you. Carried. Okay, 9.4, the Civic Assurance Riskpool Annual Report. Dave, would like to come back to see if you happen to have any questions on this one. Anything you'd like to note? Obviously, take the paper and the update is read. Anything you'd like to note, Dave, specifically?
Look, I will I know I'll take the paper as read, but I just will make a couple of points. This is an exceedingly difficult time for the board, who, on behalf of all members, are governing the wind-up of this scheme. They're dealing with a court case that, in regard to a member, which has gone against them. They're working with reinsurers in London in regard to both that outcome with Napier and with the potential outcomes of other cases which are about to be heard for, I think there's 3 other members involved, but multiple claims, and the first of those is coming up in September in the courts here. So it's a really difficult time to keep funding these positions, because if you don't, then kind of all members ultimately would be liable if there's no reinsurance available to sit in behind anything that goes against Riskpool. In addition to that, because of those difficult circumstances, they're likely to seek to amend the trust deed to provide additional protection to those directors acting on behalf of all members. And that's something that's coming up as well that will require the majority support from all members.
Okay, thank you. It's all a very difficult situation that we have here. Just to clarify, I think, Dave, that the risk here for council and the disclosures that go with it, I know they're in the paper, but I think it's worth just calling those out so people are comfortable, they understand what that means.
Yeah, so the sort of knowns are that to keep the operating costs going to manage these claims and proceedings in the UK, all the members need to continue to contribute to that. It's quite difficult to find the exact number that will relate to this council, but my maths would show that I've put in here that, you know, I think the next call, which is only probably a matter of a few days or weeks away, is likely to be in the order of 100,000 if the historical kind of proportions play out. We are not one of the bigger members. Auckland and Christchurch are the 2 biggest members. And then the second one is, I've just indicated in this paper that in the unlikely event that everything goes against, both the court cases and the reinsurance, who knows what the quantum of that is, but I just gave an indication based on that same proportion. If there were claims of, say, 100 million, what it would kind of, just to give you an indicative feel. I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but just to give you an indicative feel.
Okay, thank you. And then just the last point also in point 15, I think, of your paper, just in regards to disclosures we may or may not make around contingent liabilities.
Sure. So I think given what we know and the briefings that I've sat in on, we should make some disclosure in our annual report. It's impossible for us to quantify a position. I've just given indicative guidance if a whole lot of things played out, and helpfully Riskpool themselves have recognised this for the 70 odd members that are involved here and have drafted a consistent note as a contingent liability note that all members could review and seek to use.
Yeah, thank you. So the current recommendation from management will be that we do add that note consistent with what other members of Riskpool are using, and presumably, without putting Chantal on the spot, Audit will be happy with that note. Yeah, we'll review it clearly first, but the expectation is it'll be consistent with what other councils are going to be using. As long as we're consistent, it should be fine. Oh. Okay. Okay, so, and just for those online, so Audit have confirmed that there is an expectation of disclosure. It was raised in the audit plan. There is an expectation of our disclosure, so we will be making that disclosure consistent with others. Councillor Swiggs.
How many regional councils are involved, and are all of the claims related to building consent authority works?
I should be able to answer your first question. I know out of the regional councils and territorial authorities, there's all but 3, I think, in New Zealand that are members, but I can't specifically say whether they are regional ones, those outliers or not. The Napier case is about a weather tightness case, and I suspect the one in Queenstown and another one in Auckland are the same. So I think it's highly likely that they're weather tightness, the ones upcoming.
Okay. It's actually, I don't know, it's a comment rather than a...
Okay, thank you. Any other questions before I put the motion in relation to that Riskpool paper? No? Okay. Well, I'm happy then to put the motion that the Audit and Risk Committee notes the update on the status of Riskpool and the implications for the Canterbury Regional Council as a member organisation during the winding up phase of the insurance scheme. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Swiggs. Seconded, Councillor Ward. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you.
I was just going to say, I mean, from a councillor point of view, I'm incredibly frustrated with this because these claims are relating to building consent authority works, and we are not holding any of that building consent authority works function within this council. So it is incredibly frustrating and disappointing that we are in this situation. And I do worry about some of the changes that are upcoming and about future liabilities. So I think we need to be very careful in the future about what liabilities we might be putting ourselves forward for.
Yes, noted. Okay, sorry. Yeah, Councillor Edge, you just want to follow up?
I had also thought that the Riskpool thing was also to do with the claims in the Edgecombe stock bank collapse issue. Am I wrong on that?
I couldn't answer that, Dave. Are you aware?
Okay.
Okay, the answer is no. Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. 9.5, health, safety and wellbeing. And I welcome Kirsty to the table. Can I just confirm that the Riskpool motion was actually carried? Pretty sure it was. Yes, thank you. Okay, 9.5, health and safety and wellbeing. Welcome Kirsty to the table and welcome you to, again, take your report as read, but talk us through some key aspects, please.
Cool. Kia ora, thank you. I will take the paper as read. I just wanted to say that the last time I attended this meeting, there was some robust discussion around our visit or impending visit to the Chatham Islands. And I really want to provide assurance here that it was a really fruitful visit. We met with some core people who can support us should something go awry over there. I met with the hospital and met with a couple of nurses. So if a serious incident occurred, they did agree that they would be able to provide our first statement because they would be looking after the injured staff member before they flew out. And then we met with Fulton Hogan, who are, their roading crews over there. And so they were able to provide confidence and support that if we needed a scene to be secured, that they would be able to provide that support as well. So we came away, we also met with the council, but we came away with real value in those relationships, and there has been a subsequent follow-up phone call with the hospital, and they were really appreciative that we were on the ground. That was their feedback. And it was good to get a real bird's eye view of the island itself. And I can say that from my perspective, I think of a population of less than 600, and that for me equated to the fact that the island might be quite small, but it's actually quite large. And so our staff member over there was able to provide us with a really good view of that, and we went to the port and met all the port staff as well, because that's really critical work, and to understand the type of work that our staff undertake while they're there. So it did provide real assurance from my perspective. Stephanie may want to add some value there, but it was an excellent visit. You also asked for us to provide more detail around our data, and so we've provided that this month, which gives a clear picture. We have had for a couple of 3 months some low reporting, but we've done a lot of internal education and talked with our leadership groups to ensure that the health and safety app is being downloaded by staff, so we get real time. Have you all downloaded the app because it was made available to you? Excellent. So, just as we move forward towards the end of the year, it might be quite valuable for you. And again, I offer that support if you wanted to understand how to use the event plan as well. And so yes, that's our report. The main focus for us was really to do with the Chatham Islands, and I felt that was a really worthwhile visit. Any questions?
Thank you. I do have a question, but I'm going to open it up for the councillors first. And Councillor Karakia, you've got a question.
This is more of an observation now, if that's okay. Kia ora for your report. And I think just one of the things is you use the word robust. In some ways, it wasn't even in this forum; it was in others as well. But at least, as your report is saying, you were over there, you went there, you saw it firsthand, and there's nothing like kanohi ki te kanohi, face to face, so that you get a very good idea of exactly, what the situation is over there. I think one other thing is that even though the island has got 700 people, there is well over 20,000 that actually have ancestral roots back into the Chathams. And those people are still very, very active on the mainland, as they call this place. And so it's not just about the 700, even though we're providing the services there, but it's also about that extended whānau that they have there. So I just want to make that point as well. But thank you for your report. Thank you to everyone that was involved, particularly our senior executive team, and also the other fellow councillors here that actually felt, that we needed to actually ensure that we do what we've actually just done. So kia ora to you. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Further questions? Councillor Southworth.
I think great to hear that you are getting the app sorted out. I think that's like near misses in particular is something I know is really important in terms of prevention of worse outcomes. So does that explain, so on looking at the non-critical risks, notice people process has gone from like one event or one report in April and then 5 in May. So you'd expect to be seeing an increase in the numbers, which doesn't reflect necessarily an increase in actual events, but is a reflection of in the earlier time of improving people's reporting. Is that fair to say some of those patterns we're seeing in here that's what you think is happening here?
I do, and I think that the fact that you can real-time report in the field, I think when staff come back to the office, there's the opportunity for distraction, but to be able to real-time report on the field is important, and that app successfully enables staff to do that.
And then I have a different question on paragraph 16. You report that there's work continuing to increase the visibility of the public transport incident database, which I think is in collaboration. I'm not sure if that database is our database or our operators' database or a combination of the two. But have you got anything you can add as a timeline when we're going to be seeing a bit more clarity around incidents or particular areas of risk? And just to note that I am sort of picking up on members of the public who have had experiences sometimes that don't feel is adequately addressed, that are sound like health and safety. Of course, I have got no mechanism to test and see, is it a valid concern or complaint? But it would be good. Yeah, I think it's important that we start to really see more of this. That overview of what's happening with contractors that we have that are very much in the public domain, and that interface with us and our responsibilities in health and safety of the public in those circumstances.
So I have made connections with the public transport area. So we have now, they've given us oversight of their database, which isn't actually part of our database. Our database is for our staff that we pay for, in terms, and so any incidents related to their work for the staff that are employed by Environment Canterbury, we get to see firsthand. The contractor database, we now have access to have a lens in, which we have no influence over, apart from the fact that we might provide some guidance. So I met with the manager of PT and just explained that I'd like a closer relationship, and if there was any support that we could give into that environment, being mindful that they have several contractors that undertake work for them. And then I've also had a recent conversation around some of the training, emotional support training that we can provide, certainly for our staff who are on the receiving end of some of those public calls. but also having a higher level view to make sure that the training that we do provide in conflict resolution, I'm looking at that from a provider point of view at the moment and looking to ensure that the training that we do provide is fit for purpose, but also that we can perhaps offer that to not us pay, but talk to Metro to say, look, this provider is providing really consistent and good training for us. Would you like to take that up for some of your people? Because some of the stuff that the bus drivers certainly have to deal with on a day-to-day basis is pretty dynamic.
So, thank you for that. But also, I'm thinking about where there are incidents that are with our operators, but that as the contract, we're contracting the services that I'd understood that we should have some oversight at the end of the day. Like we do carry some certainly sort of reputational risk, if not actual health and safety risk, in terms of incidents that are occurring that our operators, depending on how they're training and how so on. Like, are we doing some work around that? And the particular area I've had some concerns with over the years is around bus drivers and their the way they pass cyclists in particular is something that I've observed has not always been great, although I haven't, more recently things seem to have improved, just my perception, but I've got no data to back any of that up. So it's that type of thing as well that I'm interested in.
That's where I'm sort of heading, is that the sort of training that we're providing our internal staff, then we can, because we are somewhat removed because it is in a contracting space, but we can influence and provide the context of suggestion to say, look, we've got this provider, or have you considered this? We are looking at your database, and just providing them, I guess, free advice from a health and safety team that sits, on the outside, in the hope that there will be an occasion where they might take that up. So looking at not replicating or going out and sourcing training for themselves, but finding the opportunity, if we're saying this is a really great provider, make that contact and deliver that training to your contractors or make it available.
Thank you. Councillor Edge.
Sort of just related to that, I was just wondering about the security officers that we've got on buses. Do they provide a report of the incidents that occur with them in terms of safety issues?
I'm not entirely sure what the relationship is between the security company and the bus company, and whether that is in fact the case. I'm certainly happy to go away and find out for you and provide an answer next time. And I catch the bus. So I think it's a fabulous service, and so I watch it not only from a public perspective, but also as someone who leads health and safety for the council. And you do sometimes, not very often, see incidents where the security people. I mean, one day, a couple of weeks ago, there was someone obviously passed out on the concrete, so they were being very, very gentle with them and sorting them out. So I'm not sure, but I'm happy to find out whether they do write a report of their day's activities or whether that's filed as an incident report. But I suspect that part of that incident reporting that we're looking into is driven by them anyway.
Okay, thank you. Just a comment I'd make is it's a little disappointing, but it is what it is around the violence and aggression still being one of the key risks. That's obviously a very challenging area. The one question I had was, I think it was at the last meeting actually, we did discuss from a health and safety point of view with the elections coming up, just a health and safety plans around that process and people being out in the public domain around the election process, councillors, candidates, etc. I'm not sure whether that landed anywhere. Was there any further discussion around that just general concern in the public eye around councillors throughout the election process?
There has been there is clear rules that we all know about, as you
guidance issued around security.
That's more what I was getting at. Yeah, it was more the health and safety
and
aspect.
Okay,
yeah, thank you.
It's pretty clear, certain that it had been issued.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, any further questions then around the health and safety report? No? Okay, I'm happy then to put the motion that we receive the report on health, safety and wellbeing. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Ward. Seconder? Councillor Edge. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? Thank you. Thank you, Kirsty. Okay, risk management update, including security. Curtis, welcome back. And again, happy to have you take the report as read, but to highlight anything, please.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora koutou. So I will just take the opportunity to highlight a couple of key points within the paper itself. Firstly, thinking about the strategic risk profile. At a current state, I think it's important to acknowledge that what we've done from this report is start to integrate some of the key programs and initiatives being led through the change and improvement section. And whilst that seems a small change, it's an important recognition of the work that we do in some of those key change initiatives and how it actually supports the management of our strategic risks. So we'll be looking for further opportunities to enhance that reporting. From a go-forward perspective, from a strategic risk side, I think it's equally important to note that we are planning to schedule a workshop early in the next triennium with Council as we seek to refresh our overall strategic risk profile. As you would expect, it is potentially more dynamic in nature than it has been in the past, but it's an important part of our overall risk process. And then the third that I'd highlight is actually in the risk activity plan. It's particularly topical in recent times, but I think it's incredibly timely as well for us to look at our crisis management and business continuity arrangements, a recognition that our kaimahi are regularly involved in responses to adverse weather events, for example. And so from our perspective, that means it's even more timely that we take a good look at our overall business continuity framework, ensure that it's fit for purpose, and that we've got opportunities to improve. We do that. So we'll be taking the opportunity to work through that, and we'll bring relevant updates on that through the committee once we've gone through a process with management. So I just thought it's important to recognise that in the context of recent events.
Yeah, thank you. That's very, very good items to be highlighting, I think, out of that current plan and the process going forward. Any questions then of Curtis on any of the report? Yes, thank you, Councillor Southworth.
Yeah, on page 272, there's the table of strategic risk dashboard. The effective relationships, it sounds a bit nitpicky to start with. I think that the band colour should be on amber, with probable moderate being the highest risk in the box, if I'm understanding how those boxes work. So I think it should be an amber category there, not the yellow. But my particular question with it is, we've got L and C, which are lack of clarity and trust between governance and management, and then C, breakdown in community relationships by not meeting expected community outcomes. So C specifically, I'm just wondering how that, because I mean, there's quite a lot of, like, I don't know about, my sense around the table, and councillors come and talk about how their communities are really unhappy, that we don't have good reputation amongst them, also more environmentally minded. We don't have a good reputation amongst farmers. Now, how much of that is sort of hyperbole, which I think councillors can be quite prone to, frankly, but really, unbiasedly decide which box this is going to sit into, those are going to sit into. How are you determining which box that those go in? And I'm thinking particularly for me, the C, from the sense I get around the table, could potentially go up a spot up to possible rather than unlikely.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Southworth. I'm loath to dive into a detailed technical view of risk methodology, but it's a very topical question. And I think the short answer to that is we do have a methodology that sits in behind this, which looks at a range of consequence criteria that we consider and we assess, and that informs a rating around that. The second, and I think equally important reflection on your question, is that assessment needs to be regular and continuous. And many organisations fall into the trap of kind of setting and forgetting assessments of strategic risk. And so the process that we look to refresh early in the next triennium will particularly focus around being really clear on what are the material risks for us, but also how do we ensure that the monitoring and the reassessing of those risks is timely, but recognising that clearly management have a key role in understanding the data that is out there that informs the actual assessment and where something falls within a matrix. My last point that I make is it's a little bit of a personal perspective, is that it's really important that we consistently assess risks. The most important thing is that we are taking action against them. So yes, we will continue to refine the methodology. The key piece here is, and particularly for us in reporting to you as a council, is that you have confidence that we are taking action on the right things.
And that was going to be my follow-up question, because looking down that column, and I'm assuming this is because it's sitting in the yellow medium, then when you get down to the line under relevant change and improvement work, there isn't anything sitting there. And I presume that's a reflection of where those risks are currently sitting, rather than, because the other three categories, which are higher, have got things identified as work to do. Is that correct?
I can clarify that slightly. That is not to suggest that there is no work happening in the management of those risks. The process, the first step we've taken in this kind of bringing that view around change integration, is we have a small number of quite significant programs and initiatives which have been overlaid against those risks. But it's not to say, A, that some of that work in those initiatives is not contributing to the management of that risk, nor is it to say that these are the only things that are being done. So it's the starting point of further work in that space.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just following on Councillor Southwood, are you able to, can I just confirm my understanding? This is a high-level generic risk profile for the entire ECAN, but that key projects, and I think last time we looked at project methodology, would also have their own risk profile, and that may be a better, particular projects might have a different profile than the generic profile of council. So some of those tensions you're talking about could well be reflected differently in particular projects, especially where you might have quite stark stakeholder positions. So it's kind of useful just to recall this is a generic high-level overall ECAN, but it's not the only risk profile that might be managed, and some of those may well be more starkly presented in the context of specific projects where they would have their own risk profile, which would reflect the particular positionings in relation to those issues.
Yeah, Giles?
Yeah, I mean, I think this conversation and this discussion generically reinforces the point that we've tried to make through the paper, and that Curtis has been highlighting, is that we need to refresh how this profile fits in and integrates with projects, with core service delivery risk, with health and safety risks, so that we bring a holistic picture of risk more regularly, both to ELT and to ARC, whilst also recognising that risk doesn't sit in a silo. We're actually managing risk every day. What we also need to do is to be able to demonstrate that we're managing risk in that way, and that's the work that Curtis is leading, and will culminate in an important step in that process, which is the workshop with council. But that won't be the end of the process. That will be the...
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, any further questions then on the risk framework? If not, I'll put to the motion that the Audit and Risk Committee receives the update on the Canterbury Regional Council's strategic risks and mitigations, and endorses the update provided on the organisation's risk activity plan, including proposed timing of strategic risk and risk appetite engagement with the committee and the Canterbury Regional Council in the next triennium. Do I have a mover for that? Thank you, Councillor Swiggs. Second to Councillor Southworth. Any further discussion? All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against?
Aye.
Right, thank you. Carried. Item 9.7 is the committee's chair report. I'm happy to talk to that. Again, take it as read, highlighting just a couple of things. We did reply and provide feedback on the Office of the Auditor General's annual plan, one of 31 stakeholders who did so. That plan has now been finalised, and there's a link to that should you wish to look at it. And just noting that we do have a new Controller and Auditor General, so Chantal is a new boss, with Grant Taylor. another grant. Seems to be a lot of grants in the room at the moment. Grants going around everywhere. A couple of points to note as part of the audit process. Audit New Zealand do ask for a fraud-related questionnaire that does go to the chair. The audit standards require it to be signed from the chair. The chair did forward that to me for review before he completed that and signed it and returned it to the audit team. And then the last thing just to note there, I guess, in that point 11 under local government environment, of course, you'll well be aware of it, but we are in some changing and some interesting times around our current central government position around local government. And so we do need to keep a very close eye on some of the specific activities that we are aware of, for example, the bill that's there, but also, as we know, some wider conversation in the sector in relation to the risks that may pose going forward to this organisation. So I'm sure you're all well aware of that as councillors, but it's worth noting that from an audit and risk point of view that there is some significant, I would say, potentially, central government risk. Councillor Swiggs.
I just had a question or a comment on that particular point. I was having a very brief conversation with Carolyn before, and it was two sentences that you said to me was like, actually, you need to be in the conversations that we're having around, that me and Craig have been having with the council and around the functions, what we're doing, the forms and all of those conversations. So I believe personally that you should be involved in that, because two sentences you said to me changed a whole lot of the thinking that I even had from a risk point of view for the council and also some of the functions that we do. So I don't know how we progress that, but I think it would be very useful if we moved that to happen.
We should just send Carolyn and Mike all the stuff we've done to date. So let's make sure we get that done.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, happy to include that in the circulation. Yeah, but it had to be included in the circulation. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I can just send you all that stuff directly to you too. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been sending it around to everybody anyway, so and it's all been public, so but you should be caught up on it. So thank you, and happy to sit down with you and do that.
Okay, thank you. Any other further comment before I put the motion that we receive the report? Okay, I'll then put that motion that we receive the report from the chair. Thank you, Councillor Karakia. Thank you, Councillor Edge. All those in favour? All right, anyone against? Thank you, carried. Okay, we then move to resolution to exclude the public. Thank you, management team. I'm happy to move from the chair that Robin Fitchett, General Counsel, Chantel, Audit Director Corbett, Audit Manager be permitted to remain at this meeting after the public have been excluded because they have knowledge relevant to the matters under consideration, and that we moved into public excluded at 2:09 p.m. I'm happy to move. Someone like to second? Thank you, Councillor Ward. All those in favour? All right, thank you. Okay, we'll start with the minutes of the Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. We back in? Back in. Okay, so we are now back in public. The next meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting will be held on the 1st of October, pending receipt of the draft annual report for review. I now declare the meeting closed and would like to close with a karakia, please, Councillor Chair Pauling.
Ai, tēnei te mihi kia koe, mō tō mahi kai hautu o tēnei waka, tēnei rā, kia koutou e nā kai kaunihera, nā kai mahi, mō tō mahi hoki, tēnā tātou. Ai, he karakia whakakapi o tātou nei hui, kia tau nā manaakitanga o nā me karo ki runga ki tēnā o tātou, kua mahia, tuhua mā kihiki, kia toi te reo, kia toi te mana, kia toi te aroha, tūturu whakamā, kia tīna, haumi e hui e tāi.
Thank you. Kia ora.
Thank you.